Welcome back to another episode of Import Modify. On this episode, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. We'll be working on my shopmate Eric's SV650. If you haven't met Eric already, this is Eric. Eric purchased himself a SV650 in order to start cutting up with me once the weather gets warm. We'll start having some fun on some sport bikes, and he can start getting used to riding them and start doing some track days with me. So that's what we got going on this episode, so stay tuned. All right, guys, so we need to get this bike up off the ground and get things prepped in order to start doing work on it. Now, Eric bought this bike. It's been sitting a long time in storage, and typical carburetors are dirty. They need to be cleaned up. And he's also got a clutch problem with it not engaging properly. So we're going to be going through all this and trying to get the bike ready. And hopefully by the end of the episode, we'll be able to go ahead and take this thing on the rip. Eric's got to learn how to ride a motorcycle. How much experience do you have riding bikes?
0. I can do bicycles.
Okay, so he's got a lot to learn. So, all right, cool. We'll get this thing going, and I'll start teaching him how to ride, and we'll see how that works out. So, but first of all, to lift this bike up in the proper manner, he actually got some stands with the bike. Now, the stands here, they have little block ends on it, and they also have these hook pieces. Now, luckily enough, I had some extra swing arm spools laying around in my toolbox, and basically these have these little pieces right here on the bottom of the swing arm. They basically thread in right there and allow you to utilize this part of the stand in order to lift the bike up properly, and it's a lot quicker and easier using these hooks as opposed to the blocks. And sometimes when you use the blocks, they wiggle loose and then they fall off the stand. So we're gonna go ahead and mount those up real quick and then get the bike lifted. All right, guys, so we got the stand all situated on the rear, and that's basically how it works with the spools on the swing arm. So that's lifted up, and he also did get a front stand with the bike as well. And the way that this stand works, it has just some lift pads that go on the bottom of the forks. So it lifts the bike up evenly so we can work on the bike and not have to worry about the bike being at a 45-degree angle, and it makes things a lot easier. So whenever you get yourself a new motorcycle, it's always best to get yourself a repair manual like that. But I told Eric to buy one.
Hey, there it is. See them internets?
All right, so he's got a repair manual. So now we're gonna look up how to gain access to the carburetors. Usually you take off the front seat and the gas tank, and that's basically it. But I was looking at the seat and it's just not, apparent how it actually comes out. So we're gonna look that up real quick, and we're gonna be removing the seat and the gas tank to gain access to the carburetors. And then from there, we'll be taking off the carburetors, and we'll be tearing those bad boys down and fully cleaning them, putting it back together, and seeing if we get this thing running. All right, so pretty easy to get the seat and gas tank off. Basically, you had these covers on the side that expose where the seat bolts down on each side. Then after that, you take the front bolts off of the tank, and it has a hinge on the back where you can open it up like a hood. Then you have one electrical connector for the level sensor, one overflow vent, and a vacuum line, and the fuel line that feeds the carburetors. Then after that, you take off the two 12mm bolts, and allows you to take the tank off. So now that we got everything exposed, we're gonna have to remove the air box assembly And then after that, that will expose the carburetors, but that's the one of the carbs right there, and the other one's gonna be in the front. So, because this is a V-twin, the carburetors are on each side of the head. So we're gonna look at the manual real quick on how to take all this out, and then we'll show you guys. All right, so we got the air box off of the motorcycle, exposing the carburetors, and it's pretty simple. There was 2 clamps holding each side down right there. We undid the clamps, and then there was 2 vents right here on the side. We undid those and basically pulled up, and that freed up the air box. Now we're gonna move on to taking the carburetors off, and to do that, it has similar clamps on the bottom holding the carburetors onto the head. So we got easy access to that one. We got to get access to the front one, so Eric's going to start taking the side fairings off, and we will gain access to that. And looking at the carburetors, they look like they're pretty easy to take off. We have throttle linkage here, we have a fuel line right here, and the clamps, and then we'll take those out. And there may be a couple other things in order to free it up, but we'll just figure it out as we go. So we got the side fairings off of it now, and as you can tell, we have all the accessibility that we need in order to get to the carburetors on each side. And a pretty cool feature on this bike is the console, well, the gauge cluster rather, and the headlights all stay in place without having to take all that off. You just simply take off the side fairings, and it's pretty simple to do. Now you have to make sure you take the mirrors off because the mirrors bolted through the top fairing and the stay. So that, some bolts right here, here, and there's a screw that goes down in there, and then undo the wiring for the turn signal, and that allows you to take that off. So now we got accessibility to the carburetors. We're gonna go ahead and take off the carburetors. Okay, so now that we got the carburetors off, there's always going to be some fuel left in the float bowl right here. That's where the fuel is kept at. So you have these little drain plugs right here. So basically what you got to do is just loosen those drain plugs, which this one right there. And you let the fuel come out. Basically that's going to get all the fuel out of the float bowl, and that'll allow us to take the float bowls off without any fuel spilling everywhere. So just good practice to do that before you start disassembling the carburetors. Alright, so we need to separate the carburetors individually, and we need to take these brackets off in order to do that, but you have a linkage right here that links the throttles together. So there's a little Carter clip right there, also right there. So we're going to remove that, remove the linkage. Then there's some 10mm nuts and bolts. We'll just take those off, and that will allow us to separate the carburetors individually, and from there we'll tear them down and start cleaning things. All right, so I got the mounting brackets off of the carburetors now. We got them separated. I did mess up a hose. This is a 19-year-old motorcycle, so some of the hose is a little bit brittle. It's not a bad deal. We'll go ahead and replace those whenever we come to that part of it, but we're going to be disassembling these carburetors now. This is a CV carburetor, which stands for constant velocity. You have this slider right here. So whenever you're cracking the throttle open, that throttle plate opens up, then you're going to have air flowing across this venturi right here, and that creates an air pressure difference up in the diaphragm right here and allows this slide to open up. And when that happens, that needle right there goes down into the float bowl, and the jetting and all that is connected to that. So when this slides up, fuel will start coming up through that where that needle is and getting into the engine. That's basically how they work. But once I tear them down, I'll go through the pieces which consist of the carburetor itself. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, guys, so I got the carburetors torn down now. Basically, this is just the shell of the carburetor, and these are the internal pieces of the carburetor itself. Now, this right here is the jetting. These three pieces right here. This is a jet that controls the airflow in the front of the carburetor where the venturi is at. So basically, in a nutshell, how it works is just a metered fuel leak is how a carburetor works. You're going to have air passing through the orifice right here, and that's going to create a difference in pressure in the float bowl as opposed to where the air flows across, and that's going to cause fuel to be sucked up through these jets and come out through ports either here where the needle's at, or if you can see, they have other ports like right down in there. There's little holes that allow fuel to be metered through as well. And basically you have this jet right here, which controls the idle circuit of the carburetor, and then you have a combination of, this is your main jet, that's the wide open throttle jet, and then you have this tube that slides over this piece right here. This is where this needle sits inside this tube right here, and as you can tell, it's got holes in it. So when you're coming off of the idle circuit, starting to rev up, basically fuel will start metering through this main jet into this tube, coming through these ports right here on this tube because the needle is coming up, and then the more the needle rises, the more these holes are exposed until basically it's all the way unseated from this tube, and then you have mainly fuel being metered through this main jet right here, and that's your wide open throttle. So you got idle, mid-range, wide open throttle, and basically that's how it works. It's all metered through right there, and that's how you control the fuel flow through the carburetor, and that's the fuel side of things. And basically this needle right here that sits on the CV slide, it sits up on the top of the carburetor right here, and then you have this port right here that connects straight through onto this side where the throttle is on the back side. So when it's fully closed, it creates a vacuum through here, which pretty much sucks the bottom of the diaphragm down, keeping the slider all the way down, and everything runs through the idle circuit. And then as you start increasing the throttle, it starts opening up the throttle plate itself, creating a difference in air pressure between the bottom side and the top side of the diaphragm, causing this to start sliding up. And when it starts sliding up, it comes off of the seat of the tube right here, allowing the fuel to start metering through there. And then it goes through the mid-range circuit into the top-range circuit, which is this jet that controls that. And that's basically a simplified explanation of how it all works. You can go on for a long time explaining the theory of these things. It's been a while since I've talked about these things, so I'm trying to recall how it all works in general, but basically that's how it works. So we're gonna go ahead and clean it up. This thing is clogged up, I can tell. So we'll get these jets all nice and clean. I got carburetor dip, we'll dip them, It's a chemical that eats away any of the old fuel and whatnot inside these jets. We'll get them all cleaned up. We'll get everything installed, and we'll put it on the bike and see how well it runs after that. All right, guys, so I got the first carburetor cleaned up and put back together. Everything is good to go on this one. So basically the way that I clean them is when they're all shelled out like that, I go ahead and I take carburetor choke cleaner, or in this case brake cleaner, with compressed air with an air chuck on the end that has a rubber tip, and I put the hose of the brake cleaner into the orifices and I spray it thoroughly, paying attention to the holes inside the venturi, making sure that I see some fluid squirting through. And I also put the air chuck on the exposed orifices and I blow compressed air in there, making sure that I hear or feel air blowing through on the opposite ends. And I found out that this is part of the choke system right here. So I have them all cleaned up and blown out, and it is good to go. Now I removed the idle jet from the dip, and I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up, but you can actually see the light through it now. So these things were 100% clogged up, so that was his problem with the idling of the motorcycle. And also I went ahead and cleaned these out as well. So we got the jets and everything dipped and cleaned. So now we're gonna go ahead and reinstall all these pieces back into the carburetor. Then after that, we'll put the brackets on, get everything back together as an assembly, and install it on the motorcycle. Now Eric, he went ahead and bought new spark plugs for it, and it's a damn good thing he did, because where's your old one at, Eric?
It's in the box.
Okay. This is the condition of the spark plugs that was in it. So definitely needed some spark plugs. So kudos on him for getting that. He changed out the oil in the motorcycle, so it's got fresh oil, fresh plugs. We're gonna have clean carburetors, and we'll be able to go ahead and put fresh fuel into the gas tank. He went to the store and got some gas. So here in a minute, once we put it all back together, we'll be able to fire this thing up and see if all the problems are fixed. Now his clutch is grabbing, he said, and I'm wondering if the clutch friction and drive plates are stuck together from the oil just sitting over time. So once we get it cranked and running, I'll be able to engage and disengage the clutch with the motorcycle up in the air and see if we can free up the clutch that way, because grabbing the lever itself, it feels great. It feels like a clutch should feel. So we'll see if that'll free up the clutch, and if it don't, we'll have to open up the case or go through the mechanism and see exactly what the hell is going on with that, but that is yet to be seen. So let's go ahead. I'll put this thing in time lapse. We'll put this one back together and we'll move on. right, guys, so we got it all together. We got fuel in the tank now, so we're gonna cross our fingers, crank this bad boy up, and hopefully she runs good.
You got a fire extinguisher, right?
Yeah, I got one over there. Yeah.
She's purring.
You gotta let
Not
it.
quite.
You gotta let it fill up. Success. We got the thing idling correctly now. It never ran like that before, right?
Never since I've had it.
Never ran that way. So what we did was the correct thing. We cleaned the carburetors. We got everything working right. Now the bowls need to fill up in order to have enough fuel in the carburetors to rev it up. But I forgot to tighten down the throttle cables, so we're gonna have to take the air box back off and tighten down the throttle cables. But hey, she's running now. Screw it in just a little bit.
Got it.
Okay, I'm gonna crank it back up.
Yep.
All right, just let it be. You need to let it warm up. Tighten the throttle a little bit. Okay guys, we'll call that a success. I have to go and take that air box back off to tighten down the throttle cables because I forgot, but she runs now. You said it barely idled with the choke all the way on, right?
Not idle, but you can tell one cylinder is a lot stronger than the other.
Okay, so now she's got good throttle response. She revs well.
You did that before it was just that.
Carburetors are good to go now, so we're gonna go ahead and button up everything. It's dark outside, so tomorrow we're gonna teach Eric how to ride the thing.
You're gonna make me cry.
All right, so Eric has his safety gear on. He is ready to go. Now remember, you shift with your feet, clutch with your hand. It is the opposite of driving a car. I know you can drive a car very well, so you should have no problem at all. How do you feel?
A little nervous.
All right, man, go ahead and put her in gear and take off.
Down.
Give it a little bit more gas when you take off. There you go. Oh, and he stalls it. No big deal. And he's off. I feel proud like a dad who taught his son how to ride a bicycle for the first time. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead, get my helmet on, and go ride with Eric up and down the street, and we'll just wrap up the video after that, guys.
My God, 45 miles an hour never felt so fast.
Go ahead and go. I'll follow behind. All right, guys. Well, I got to say, I'm very proud of Eric. He did very well for his first time riding a motorcycle. He was shifting great. He was riding great. And how did it feel, buddy?
It's a lot more fun than I expected. It's just raw. Here you are. You're right in the power, right in the fun. Yeah, I'm going to do this a lot more.
Cool deal. See, I knew he would get hooked. So, well, guys, that's all we have on this episode. We successfully got the motorcycle up and running, and the clutch issue was just as I expected. It was just been sitting for a long time, and the oil kind of gelled up around the friction and drive plate. So we're able to free that clutch up relatively easy, and now it works great. So Eric's going to be taking a riding school to get his driver's license, and then after that, he's going to get the bike legal and everything, and then we'll be riding. So future content of motorcycles will be in the future of Import Modify. As you can tell, I do have a lot of bikes. And speaking of bikes, I actually picked up this Ninja 750 right here for $100, guys. So I bought that thing. It does not have a title, so I will be getting a frame with the title in the future. We'll be working on this bike, building it up and getting it up and running. That is an iconic sport bike from the golden era of super bikes, along with the GSX-R and along with the RC51. I am over 40 years old. I'm from that golden sport bike era. So I do like to collect bikes in that era because things are becoming relatively easier to buy now. But this episode is a great success, and I'm very happy. How about you, Eric? Until next time, guys, like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I will definitely see y'all on the next episode.